Hello and welcome to the World Today. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. Here's what's coming up on the program. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calls Palestinian recognition disgraceful as dozens walk out of his UN speech. This comes as UK Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy calls for a ceasefire in Gaza. Plus, Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima says Nigeria can make or mar trajectory of global growth. Let's begin the World Today. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has described recognition of a Palestinian state sheer madness and disgraceful. He made the comments while addressing the United Nations General Assembly in New York. His audience thinned out, though, as he took to the stage with dozens of delegates walking out in protest, while others applauded. Mr. Netanyahu said his speech was being broadcast into Gaza, directly addressing the hostages held by Hamas. He told them, "We have not forgotten you, not even for a second. The people of Israel are with you." His speech came as US President Donald Trump said he would not allow Israel to annex the occupied West Bank. Also speaking at the UN, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas reiterated his rejection of any future role for Hamas in Gaza and demanded the group disarm.
The families of our dear hostages languishing in the dungeons of Gaza. Ladies and gentlemen, last year, I stood at this podium and I showed this map. This map. It shows the curse of Iran's terror axis. This axis threatened the peace of the entire world. It threatened the stability of our region and the very existence of my country, Israel. Iran was rapidly developing a massive nuclear weapons program and a massive ballistic missile program. These were meant not only to destroy Israel, they were meant also to threaten the United States and blackmail nations everywhere. From Gaza, Yahya Sinwar dispatched waves of Hamas terrorists. They stormed into Israel on October 7th and committed acts of unspeakable savagery. From Lebanon, Hassan Nasrallah had launched thousands of missiles and rockets at our cities, terrorizing our citizens. In Syria, the murderous dictator Assad hosted Iran's forces, tightening a noose of death around our throats. In Yemen, the Houthis launched ballistic missiles at Israel while choking global trade at the mouth of the Red Sea. So what's happened over the past year? We've hammered the Houthis, including yesterday. We crushed the bulk of Hamas's terror machine. We crippled Hezbollah, taking out most of its leaders and much of its weapons arsenal. You remember those beepers, the pagers? We paged Hezbollah, and believe me, they got the message. And thousands of terrorists dropped to the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, much of the world no longer remembers October 7th, but we remember. Israel remembers October 7th. On that day, well, I'll tell you, you can remember October 7th too. You see this large pin here? It's a QR code. What I ask you to do is hold up your phones, zoom in, and you too will see why we fight and why we must win. It's all in here. On October 7th, Hamas carried out the worst attack on Jews since since the Holocaust. They slaughtered 1,200 innocent people, including over 40 Americans and foreign nationals from dozens of countries represented here.
Meanwhile, world leaders at the United Nations General Assembly have warned that cutting funds to the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees could deepen instability across the Middle East. Spain announced a new €10 million contribution, raising its total support to nearly €60 million since October 7th. UNGA President Annalena Baerbock warned that the agency was facing a $200 million funding shortfall. She criticized Israeli restrictions that have banned UNRWA from East Jerusalem and forced the closure of schools. She said blocking UNRWA's work risks further destabilization in Gaza, the West Bank and beyond, and would endanger the education of more than 500,000 Palestinian children. Elsewhere, UK Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy has called for an end to the war in Gaza and the return of all Hamas-held captives. Mr. Lammy said the newly recognized state of Palestine and the people of Israel deserve better than the horrific acts of Hamas and Israel's denial of humanitarian aid. He called for hostages out, aid in, and ceasefire, saying, "We will not rest until this day has come, and there are two states living side by side in peace and security." Mr. Lammy's remarks came just ahead of Prime Minister Netanyahu's address, where he denounced the recognition of Palestinian statehood by countries including the United Kingdom, France, Canada, and Australia.
My friends, today I echo His Majesty's sentiments, and I join him in celebrating the remarkable institution's proud 80 years as we reaffirm our historic commitment to the United Nations. We must face the challenges of the present. A present in which we in the United Kingdom do not stand up for one nation's rights whilst ignoring others, but act resolutely with the Charter as our compass. This is why I want to address directly the Israeli-Palestinian tragedy. What is happening in Gaza is indefensible. It is inhumane. It is utterly unjustifiable. And it must end now. The people of Palestine, whose state we proudly recognize this week, and the people of Israel deserve better than the horrific acts by Hamas on October the 7th that left children without their parents and parents without their children. Better than the torment of families waiting desperately for the return of their loved ones from the most barbaric captivity. Better than the fanatical rule by Hamas, a vile, pitiless terrorist organization that must have no future in Gaza. Better than Israel's denial of life-saving humanitarian aid and the catastrophic famine that it has caused. As Israel escalates its military operations and displaces Palestinian families again and again and again, there can be no answer to these horrors but concerted diplomatic action to keep the hope of peace alive. As we work with leaders from across the region and beyond in support of the US's efforts to build a consensus around a durable plan for peace, we commend the momentum achieved by the United States, Arab and Muslim states. Annexation must be prevented, a process for peace advanced, and this terrible, terrible war ended. There can be no answer except for the hostages out now, aid in now, and a ceasefire now. And I vow to you that we will not rest until this day has come, and there are two states living side by side in peace and security.
Well, following his address to the UN General Assembly earlier this week, Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima has been attending other meetings on the sidelines of the General Assembly, such as the Global Partnership for Education 2026 to 2030 Replenishment Campaign meeting, which took place in New York. He told the audience at that meeting that Nigeria, the trajectory of global growth is facing Africa, and Nigeria can make or mar that transition. Our State House correspondent, Larry Lasisi, has a report on this and other activities.
As world leaders continue with their presentations in the general debate of the 80th United Nations General Assembly, in different parts of the city, other meetings and activities are taking place. One of such is the Global Partnership for Education 2026 to 2030 Replenishment Campaign meeting, co-hosted by Nigeria's Minister of Education.
Mr. Matteo Salvini,
emphasizing the importance of education, Vice President Kashim Shettima voiced his optimism about Nigeria's large youth population.
Hope springs eternal from the hearts of men and women, and I'm absolutely certain that in the fullness of time, our much anticipated demographic bulge will be translated into demographic dividends. Ours is a very young population. So in this age of the digital revolution, we are in a unique position to fill in the gap, because the trajectory of global growth is facing Africa, and Nigeria will make or mar that transition.
Subnationals are also not left out, as they also meet with investors. After signing an MOU, the Kaduna State Governor identifies the reasons states are faring better.
The reason why we're making most of this progress and achievements is because President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, since he came in, he has done a lot in reaching out to a lot of global leaders. Without the federal government effort, subnational will not achieve much in terms of creating these opportunities.
His counterpart from Zamfara State says engagements at the annual gathering have been positive.
No, Zamfara is the state of solid minerals, and this is the thing that is ongoing now. And I'm so happy with the kind of response I received. There are people that are ready to commit their resources as well as technical expertise to do mining in Zamfara State. I mean, what else can I look for?
Meanwhile, a report presented on the sideline of the General Assembly assesses Nigeria's progress regarding the Sustainable Development Goal 16, which looks to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development.
There are a number of recommendations we recommend. One is to ensure that Nigeria have a legal framework on whistleblowing, because a lot of Nigerians, when they want to expose corruption, they get victimized. Secondly, we also call on government to ensure that they block leakages in our financial institution.
Meanwhile, at the Africa Energy Investment Summit, which also took place on the sidelines, Minister of Petroleum Oil pushed for an African solution to Africa's energy challenges.
Energy investments are among the most prolific investments you can make, and you can get the highest returns. And like I said, we have a job to do. We'll do our job by educating our people on the need for them to invest in the African Energy Bank, on the need for Africans to find an African solution to our energy financing problem, which is the most fundamental problem we have.
These activities are expected to continue as countries, subnationals, and groups take advantage of this gathering of nations. From New York, Lanre Lasisi, Channels Television News.
Well, this year, the United Nations turns 80. The UN 80 initiative aims to build on reforms within the institution and charts the way forward for its future. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Amarachi Ubani examines recurring themes at UNGA at 80.
The United Nations, the umbrella body for many countries of the world, where alliances are made and villains are warned. 80 years since its establishment, it has come a time for reflection.
What kind of world do we choose to build together?
In his opening remarks to the General Assembly, Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the world itself has changed and entered into an age of reckless disruption.
We have entered in an age of reckless disruption and relentless human suffering. Look around. The principles of the United Nations that you have established are under siege. Listen, the pillars of peace and progress are buckling under the weight of impunity, inequality, and indifference.
The remedy, in his opinion, is for leaders to determine the kind of world they need to make over the next 80 years.
What kind of world will we choose? A world of raw power or a world of laws? A world that is a scramble for self-interest or a world where nations come together? A world where might makes right or a world of rights for all?
But US President Donald Trump questions the effectiveness of the UN, saying it has not come close to living up to its potential.
What is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war.
For other countries, reforms is a must. The current UN does not reflect the present changes nor challenges.
But gender representation is not enough. What we must achieve is actual gender equity because it benefits not only women and girls, but entire societies. True equity requires systemic change, and so women's empowerment must remain at the heart of our global agenda.
African leaders have also increased calls for Security Council reforms, with Africa given a permanent seat at the Security Council.
Nigeria must have a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. This should take place. This should take place as part of a wider process of institutional reform.
Institutions rarely fail because they lack vision or ideals. More often, they drift into irrelevance when they do not adapt, when they hesitate to act, and when they lose legitimacy.
At the end of this year's General Assembly, individual countries will assess gains by the outcomes of the bilaterals and partnerships fostered, which will guide relations over the next year until 2026, when they gather again for another General Assembly. Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
Away from the UN General Assembly, drone activity at several airports in Denmark and across Europe this week has raised serious security concerns. Danish officials are calling the coordinated incidents a hybrid attack, suggesting they may be part of a larger campaign aimed at spreading fear and testing defenses. For more on this developing story, we go to Deutsche Welle's correspondent Emily Leshner in Berlin. Emily, great to see you today. What exactly happened at these airports, and how serious is the threat?
Drones violated the airspace of 4 airports, one of which is located in northern Denmark and is also used as a military base or as a military facility in addition to a commercial airport. And these incursions forced the airports to shut down temporarily while officials try to figure out what was going on and to try to contain the situation. This follows a similar incident just days earlier at Copenhagen Airport, where drone sightings forced a temporary shutdown of the airspace for several hours. And what's alarming here to European officials is the level of coordination, that these drones were not just flying near airports either. They were reportedly hovering close to critical infrastructure, including military facilities like those used for Denmark's F-35 fighter jets. The Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, called the Copenhagen incident the most serious attack on critical infrastructure to date. So some pretty strong words. And these drone incursions, have all taken place on the heels of airspace violations in other EU countries recently. To remind your audience, 3 Russian fighter aircraft flew into Estonian airspace last week. And then earlier this month, 20 drones, also of Russian origin, flew into Polish airspace. And according to NATO, that was the first time that Russian combat drones had been shot down over NATO territory. Those drones were shot down by Polish and Dutch jets. And then there was also another incident in Poland recently where drones were observed flying around government buildings. And over the weekend, cyber attacks disrupted airport activity across Europe, including here, the airport here in Berlin, as well as in London Heathrow and Brussels. So here in Europe, there's a very real concern that European readiness and response is being tested.
Right. Have Danish officials, revealed anyone they believe may be behind these disruptions?
Well, at this stage, Danish officials are being extremely cautious about directly naming Russia as a responsible actor, but several officials have insinuated that they do believe Russia or Russian state-backed actors are responsible or to blame. The Danish defense minister called these incidences a hybrid attack, as you mentioned, and this term refers to tactics that fall below what's considered the threshold of conventional warfare, but are still designed to destabilize or intimidate a country. The drones, were observed roughly within the same 24-hour time frame, and that does seem to suggest that they were coordinated and systematic. The defense minister says he has no doubt of that. And the head of Denmark's National Security and Intelligence Service told reporters at a news conference that Russian covert activity poses a security threat. He didn't explicitly say that Russia was behind these threats, but it was certainly implied.
Thanks, Emily. Well, that's our program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.